Welcome to Emma Mules from the International School of Luxembourg with a project titled The Environmental Causes of the Development of Brain Tumors. Emma investigated to what extent the exposure to medical radiation imaging, working in nuclear facilities, and uranium mining relate to the incidence of brain tumors in Canada and Austria. Let's hear it from Emma.
Hello, good morning. My name is Emma Mules, and today I'll be researching and explaining my research on the environmental causes of the development of brain tumors. So some background on brain tumors. In 2020, brain tumors were the 19th most common cancer worldwide, but some of the most deadly forms of the disease. Since 1990s, brain tumor incidence rates have increased by 39%, and I wanted to research as to why this could be. Brain tumors are a bit different to other cancers. They're graded on the characteristics of the brain tumor instead of the development and the stages of development. And although a brain tumor can be benign, it can still be life-threatening depending on the location in the brain. So when I was researching brain tumors, I needed to know what affected their development. And I came down to 3 factors: age, gender, and race, and ethnicity. And I knew that these would be confounding factors when researching what could affect their development. As can be shown in the graph on the left, we can see that ethnicity and race has an effect on the primary incidence of brain tumors. You can see that African Americans and white have a higher risk of developing a brain tumor. As well, on the graph on the right, we can see that age has an effect with the development of brain tumors. As age increases, people are more susceptible to developing a brain tumor. As well, we can see that males have a higher risk of developing brain tumors. And I needed to keep this in my findings when deciding what could have affected their development. So then I started looking at environmental factors, and in every research paper that I looked at, ionizing radiation kept coming up. Ionizing radiation display chemical changes that can affect and damage DNA. It can come from natural sources such as radon and rays that come into the Earth's atmosphere from outer space. However, they can also come from medical imaging such as CT scanning, working in nuclear facilities, and uranium mining. And therefore, I decided to analyze these 3 factors more in depth to see whether a correlation could be seen with the development and incidence of brain tumors. And then I had to decide which countries to look at in order to really get into depth into the subject. I looked at the continents which had the highest rate of brain tumors, and those were North America and Europe. On the left, we can see the distribution of countries in Europe that have the highest rate of brain tumors, and as well on the right, we can see in North America which ones have the highest rate of brain tumors. I also had to take into account the countries which would have the same level of healthcare, because I wanted to analyze CT scanning. I also had to take into account which countries displayed uranium mining and also which countries had working in nuclear facilities. So when researching this, I realized that Canada was one of the top countries in uranium mining production in 2020. As well, Austria had always had a history of opposing nuclear facilities and opposing uranium mining, and therefore I decided to choose these 2 countries in order to give a contrast. I had to take into account the race and ethnicity of both countries because I knew that these would be confounding variables. So I realized that the ethnicity of Canada's population, 69.8% were white Caucasian, and as well in Austria, 86.6% were white Caucasian. And therefore, this could be 2 countries that I could use to limit the confounding variable of race and ethnicity. I also had to take into account their healthcare innovation. And therefore, I looked at the World Index of Healthcare Innovation, and I saw that Canada and Austria had similar rankings. For my methodology, I used worldwide research centers, such as the National Library of Medicine, the Lancet, and the Global Cancer Observatory. Most of my statistics came from the Global Cancer Observatory, and this comes from the World Health Organization, and I knew they would be worldwide statistics that I could use, and they also add age standardized rates to limit the confounding variable of age. The comparisons of the 2 countries can be seen here. As we can see, CT scanners were greater in Austria per million than Canada, and therefore I decided to look at Austria when looking at the effect of CT scanning. We could also see that Canada has much more uranium mining plants, as well as nuclear facilities and nuclear plants. So I decided to look more in depth at Canada when researching these two factors. So here you can see the effect of CT scanning. I looked at the age-standardized rates of brain tumors over time, and also looked at the increase in CT scanners per million over time. And we can see that the number of CT scanners and brain tumors incidence rates increase together. I then conducted a chi-square test to look at the biological significance, and it was determined that there is a 90% chance that the number of brain tumors are dependent on the CT scanning in Austria. I then looked at the effect of working in nuclear power plants, and as I said before, I looked in depth at Canada. As we can see, the provinces that have the highest nuclear power plants in Canada are Ontario and Quebec on the left. And as you can see on the right, the provinces which have the highest density of brain tumor rates are Quebec, and therefore, I had to look at, and therefore I could see that these could potentially have a correlation. And then the effect of uranium mining. I looked at Canada, and you can see that there was a small correlation with the effect of uranium mine production and brain tumors. And I did a chi-square test, and I saw the 80% chance that the number of brain tumors is dependent on uranium mine production. I also had to look at Canada's uranium mining distribution, and I saw that the ethnicity and the gender of Canada's uranium mining workforce wouldn't be too much of confounding variables. Evaluations and limitations. In future studies, I would have looked at more countries to give a more in-depth analysis and a more worldwide to see whether these same distributions were seen in different countries. These sources. Thank you.
Hello. You did a really nice presentation about radiation. What was your main motivation to go down that road?
So I was looking at, I always knew I wanted to do, for my project, I wanted to do something to do with cancer. And I wanted to look at environmental factors specifically. And I knew that radiation was one of the main causes, I guess, when looking at brain tumors. And so all of the studies that I had looked at, radiation kept coming up as a central theme. And so I just wanted to research it more and to sort of make my own analysis and conclusions on it.
Yeah. And you just told me that you are planning, well, next year going to be at university, and that your research here is probably going to motivate you to go down a specific path. Would you say that this is a good basis to start from? Or would you say that later on you might go somewhere completely different?
Yeah, no, I think to do with neuroscience and neurobiology, I've always been interested in that. And I think that's something that throughout biological sciences I'm going to be more interested in, I guess. And so, yeah, specifically doing this project, I realized how much I like it so much, and looking at that part of biological sciences. So, yeah.
That's great. Now that we are talking about radiation, and you have a lot of movies, if you had to choose a superpower, what would it be?
As a superpower, I guess maybe to be invisible.
Invisible?
I guess sometimes to be able to teleport from one place to another. It'd just be fun and interesting.
That's true, yes. And then radiation, you touch a little bit upon it, so it can be dangerous, but it can also have positive effects. Do you think that in the future we can use radioactivity and radiation more than we are doing it right now?
I think there always has to be regulations, because as there's a downside, but it's such an amazing thing that we've discovered, and the things that it can do in science is amazing. Looking at CT scanning, obviously there's massive benefits, but I think just it should always be regulated and not used when it's not necessary. And I think there should be more awareness on the damaging effects it could have, and I just think being aware of it would help a lot. But I think it's amazing the stuff that we've researched and the stuff that we know about it now.
Yeah, that's true. And indeed, now in the world that we are in, where we need more and more electricity, I believe that radiation will become much more present. Or do you think that there might be a different way that radiation might go?
I think specifically with medical patients, it's amazing, and I think just researching more into that and the more stuff that we could learn about it, it could open new doors and new, just amazing new things in science and in everything.
Perfect. Then when we look at your presentation in general, you seem very confident, you present really nice. Is there any kind of advice that you would pass on to the people that are coming after you?
More know your subject. I guess just read over your project before, know what you're talking about, and that it's okay to be nervous. I mean, I was nervous at the start. So, yeah, but just being confident in your subject and knowing what you're talking about can help a lot.
Yeah. I remember when I was standing in front of a jury, it was a scary experience, and that's why I'm always fascinated when I see young people standing in front there and presenting academic things to a general audience without fear. So nervousness, yes, but that's really interesting. Is there one last thing that you would share with our listeners? And
just to enjoy it, just be proud of the work that you have done and be ready to share it with the jury and to also get advice from the jury, because it's an amazing experience to have advice from such esteemed researchers.
That's true. Would you have joined earlier if you knew?
Yes, I would have. Yeah, I only learned about it this year, so yeah, last year I would have wanted to have done it, or yeah, maybe even the year before, I guess.
That's perfect. But then thank you very much to be here with us, to have presented to us your project. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
And then I guess we're going to see the next elements of our show.
Yeah, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.